No genders are allowed in Monster Hunt Wild. I think this is a situation we've been seeing develop all throughout the gaming industry, where we have a sensitivity towards the gender options that you can have in character creators. We saw this with Starfield, Dragon Age, Veilguard, a bunch of other titles that have come out that have altered what you can choose, and that seems to be the case for Monster Hunt Wilds as well, where they don't have any gender options. They just have preset bodies, over 24 preset bodies, some female, some male, and this is Japan's way of avoiding the controversy that we see around characterization, at least in the West. I think Japan really doesn't care about this, but we see all the consultancy firms, the developers, the influence of the ESRB trying to get Japan to actually fold and bend to these gender non-conform methods that we see developing in the West. And I think this is Japan's way of saying, okay, we just want to stay out of this gender conversation that we're having in the West, and we just want people to play our games. And I think that's ultimately what we're seeing here with Monster Hunt Wild, where we have a developer saying, yeah, we're gonna just stay away from this conversation, and we're just gonna have you just choose whatever preset body forms, over 24. It doesn't have a name, it's just preset 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, because we saw this happening with other games as well, where they had these body type choices that you could make. And I think ultimately that aggravated a lot of people, because this felt like a slap in the face of the people that can obviously see you're doing this for gender politics reasons. And I think that slap in the face is mitigated a little bit here with Monster Hunt Wilds, because we don't have that option anymore. That option is taken away, and now we just have these 24 presets. It's just whatever you want, and the styles and body shape changes, and it's almost at random each preset. And it makes sense now that this is a sly way for Japan to avoid the gender nonsense that we're seeing in America. Of course, people are going to still be mad about that. I think that is their right to do so, because it's a weak method to actually avoid a conflicting belief that is clashing with the West right now, because the Eastern world has no concept or believes in any of the westernized concepts that are blowing up here in America and Europe as well, where they have their problems with using male, female, gender oriented identifiers. And I think that is the frustration with gamers, that we're seeing this kind of cut out of the gaming industry to favor these political activists that have invaded the space of gamers, where they're getting companies to change their overall perspective on these identifiers, because their influence is weighing more than the gamers that actually make your game successful. And I think that's the thing that is frustrating the gamers right now, where we're seeing a company bend over backwards to avoid this debate. And it's crazy to see game companies now avoiding identifying characters as male and female now. Like, what's gonna happen? We're just gonna have nothing mentioning any male or female oriented parts or characterization anymore. Just everyone is gonna be some androgynous figure with no personality that is kind of aligned with their overall gender. And I think that's the thing that's annoying gamers, where we're gonna just remove gender from video games completely, because these activists that have their own problems are coming out and attacking gamers, attacking the gaming industry to conform to their own political philosophy. I think that's the thing that I find most frustrating about this situation. And Monster Hunter Wilds, regardless of any of the politics that are going around it, I think this still looks like a great game. And I think this is showing that probably Japan is focusing on just creating good games, and all the controversies that we're seeing around games when it comes to these gender identifier and options are just noise to them. And this is their way of avoiding it, where they don't have to choose what body type 1 or form gender 1. They don't have to do any of these weird bending over backwards things. They can just say, choose a preset. It's just random presets. Some of them are female, some of them are male, whatever. Just choose something and leave us out of this. And I think that is their safest bet to stay out of the conversation. Of course, I know people are still going to be mad about this. I'm still slightly frustrated with it, but I have to give Japan its leeway here. They didn't start this conversation. This is America starting this conversation. This is America bullying Eastern developers to follow this conversation. And this is their haphazard response of saying, leave me alone, just play the game. We don't even have that identifier there. Just choose a preset and get on with the game. Don't focus on that. And I know other people have some other concerns about this game, because we know there's like a focus on diverse elements, but I think this is just something Japan usually does. I think now it's just overly magnified now, because we see these DEI goals within games, where we're seeing a lot of forced diversity pop up, and now we're hyper aware of it, when I think Japan is just doing what they usually do. They had diverse characters in the past. they do them in a way where they're still human beings, where you can see and relate to the characters. And people are kind of forcing this on Monster Hunt Wilds with this little Persian boy, where they're thinking, okay, they're doing this DEI thing again. I'm thinking, nah, I think they're just doing whatever they usually do, and this is us overreacting in America, because we've seen so much massive failure DEI games like Dustborn and like Concord that have completely alienated everyone when it comes to DEI oriented games. And I think that's the thing that we're feeling when we see any diversity now. And I think that's the failing aspect of this situation, where we're getting this frustration from the gamers, where they're thinking, okay, we're getting this type of game, but is it really trying to focus on creating a good story? I think that is the case for most Japanese games. We saw this with Metaphor Refantasio that recently came out from Atlas, the Persona series developers, where that a game focused on racial diversity elements that are around this world, this fantastical world. And I think it fit with the game itself, but us gamers are so used to the Dustborns, the Concords, and the Kill the Justice League type of games, where the focus is usually done in such a way where it's not about the story anymore, it's more about the diversity. And so when we see a game with any bit of diversity, we kind of lose ourselves thinking, okay, this is another pandering game, when in actuality, Japan is not used to making pandering games. They're just used to making their own games with a little bit of diversity here or a complete lack of diversity over there. And I think that's the elements that we're seeing from Japanese games still, for the most part, where they're still making their own game. They make their own game with their own resources, but then they have to go to the American market, and then we have the consultants coming and say, you can't have gender here, you gotta take this out, you gotta move around and with this, or we can't release your game. And I think that's what we're seeing ultimately with a lot of products coming out of Japan, where Monster Hunter Wilds is being more influenced by consultants, probably, where they're saying you have to have these gendered oriented parts into the game. They're saying we're just gonna skip out on the gender things, and we're just going to focus on the game itself. And that's what we're seeing right now with Monster Hunt Wilds, which is out in beta right now, and it seems like it's getting a lot of attention. People are hyped for it. I'm hyped for it. This is a game I'm looking forward to, and I think it's going to be a proper game that we're going to enjoy once it's released. But at least that's just my thoughts on it. Maybe you don't believe that. Maybe you think Japan is just kind of backing out. They're being a coward right now. It's not sticking to the overall creative output. And I think that's not the case with them. I think they're just confused by what's happening in America, because America is doing confusing things right now when it comes to gender and all these other elements related to DEI, where they're thinking, like, what's going on with this culture? It seems like they're losing their minds, and they're obsessed with saying men and women don't exist. And I think this is them saying, okay, you don't want to hear it, okay, we just won't even mention it, just leave us alone, let's put out the game. And I think that's what we're seeing here with Monster Hunter Wilds. But maybe you disagree with me. Maybe you think the Japan is falling apart, they're bending the knee to American politics. I think this is them not bending the knee. This is them just trying to avoid the conversation altogether. But you leave your comments, tell me what you think about the situation. What do you think about Japan kind of avoiding the genders on their player creation? I think it's an interesting path they took. I'm wondering if other game developers would do the same, because I think it's something that is an easy way to avoid the gender controversy. But you leave your comments, tell me what you think. Like, comment, share, subscribe. This is Wagner Knows Why. Catch you next time.